Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
When you hear the word coaching, what springs to mind? Football coach? Acting coach? Vocal coach? Maybe even a financial coach? Confusing, isn't it? Well, coach has become such a popular title that it's being used by lots of professions, often with no training. And sometimes coaching is just a fancy way of saying, I'll ask you a few questions and then tell you what I think you should do. Well, let's clear the air a little bit about coaching. Coaching is often confused with therapy, consulting, and mentoring. Now, those are great helping professions, but they're not professional coaching.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, the life coach. Joining us to talk more about it is Flame Schoder. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kathy.
What is a life coach?
You know, a life coach, much like in the video, is parallel to a sports coach. It's not someone who plays the game. It's not someone who does the work for you. It's someone who helps you learn how to play your best game.
Wow. Okay, so how is this different from something like mentoring or advice, counseling, that kind of thing?
In mentoring and advice, you're going to go to an expert, and they're going to tell you what they would do. And it's probably founded on some good evidence, but it's not necessarily your answer. A coach is going to want you to come up with your innate wisdom and tap into what you know is right, so that it's really your approach.
I suppose there's going to be a trick to that, and we'll talk about that later, but I'm curious as to how you became involved in this realm.
You know, that's a funny story. I was working at a store, maybe you've heard of it, called The Container Store, one of the best companies to work for many years in a row. And they have incredible work that they do there. And I ran into this woman who saw something in me. She was a customer. And she called me later after meeting her and asked if she would be willing, she said she would be willing to be my mentor, and asked if I was willing to take her on as a mentor. And I had no idea what was coming next. She spent time with me, and out of that I ended up getting some coach training. I didn't even realize it was coach training at the time. That's how new the profession is. And I just began to be more successful in my life because of these skills that I was learning. And I was having more fun, I was experiencing a lot more joy, feeling more connected with people, feeling more at peace with myself. And eventually I realized this was what I needed to do to help others.
What did she see in you that would prompt her to follow up like that? Did she ever say specifically?
She did. She said, you know, you're a young woman right now, and eventually you're going to want a family. And it would be better if you got your life in order right now so that you can support a family later, rather than waiting until that's already happened and then trying to do it in retrospect. So she saw that I was a high performer. I was someone who was very interested in having a good life, having a lot of satisfaction, but I wasn't quite there yet.
So what track, if you could share, do you think you were on prior to this meeting with her? I mean, did you have a vision? Had you thought about your life 5, 10, 15 years down the road, and what did that look like prior to this meeting?
You know, I did, and we have a saying in coaching, if you stay on the path you're on, you're bound to get where you're headed. I was definitely doing that. I would have achieved material success, but it wasn't really in connection with what I really wanted. And that's where the coaching really helped me get right.
Wow, okay, so now there is a certification process involved here. So in other words, not anybody can step up and say, this is what I do and be legit, I guess. So what did you have to go through for the certification process?
So I started out by going to the International Coach Federation, which is the most globally recognized coaching brand these days. They accredit coaching schools. So I found a coaching school that really resonated with what I was about. There are spiritual schools, there are business coaching schools, there are, mine is an ontological coaching school. And I just began to take their classes and follow their paradigm, and that was what led me, because they are an accredited school, then I had my certification at the end of that.
Okay, so classes, when you say that, that's a loaded word. What
Right.
types of classes are we talking about, and who are the instructors, right?
Right. Well, because it's an accredited school, the teachers are master certified coaches, and they are both in person, online now. Some of mine were on the phone style classes, and each school does it differently. But they all adhere to ethics, core competencies, and rigorous standards because they are accredited through the International Coach Federation.
Was there anything about that process, Blaine, that got you to thinking maybe twice about having opened this door? You know, I remember back in school you had that class, we called them the weed out class, you know, the kids who really thought they wanted to go a certain direction, but then they hit this wall and thought, oh, not for me. Did you have that in here?
Of course I did. And what I came to understand is that that's a normal part of doing anything that's new. And I was lucky to be surrounded by tons of coaches at every turn, so I got coached past that. But it's a very normal experience. They say that becoming a professional coach is the most rigorous personal development program you'll ever undertake. And that was true.
Is it because you have to learn so much about yourself that maybe you didn't feel like learning before? Is that...
In order to truly support someone else, you must first see where you are, and coach training will do that for you.
Wow, were you about in line with where you thought you were, or were there some pretty significant things that you learned about yourself?
There were a couple of very significant things, and I continue to learn. I've been doing this about 12 years, and it continues to be news to me sometimes, but there were a couple of things that really were the game changers. And I was a philosophy major in college. I've always loved self-awareness, so I was doing pretty well for a young woman, but yeah, there was some good stuff in there that I didn't want to look at, but once I did, it was very useful.
Well, and to your point, it makes it a little bit more feasible than to ask someone else to do the same.
That's right.
Right. So,
That's right.
okay, cost associated with a process such as this certification deal that you went
You know, much like going to any university, it varies by school, but if you get an accredited school, there's going to be several $1,000s worth of tuition fees as well as some mentor coaching fees.
Okay, do they set that up? Do you have to pay it all up front, or can people kind of pay as they go?
Depends on
or-
the school.
Okay.
I know most schools offer financing plans at this point because a lot of people already have a career and coaching is becoming their second career, so they're working a full-time job while they're doing this and building their business.
Well, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking, okay, so you show up at this certification deal, and you're surrounded by other folks, or at least you're meeting certain people along the way. Where are these people coming from, right? Whose light bulbs go on, or who have somebody approach them like you did to say, I'm going to try this. Who are these people?
I think for the most part, Kathy, they're high performers who say, okay, I've mastered this sort of for myself. How am I going to help? How am I going to give back? They are people who want to see the world be a better place. That's who's coming to be a coach.
Okay, so now let's go over to the other side of the fence now and tell me a little bit about, you said you've been doing this 12 years. So how many folks have you coached since you started? Is that number anywhere at the...
I'm probably at the 125 folks range.
Okay, so who are the people with whom you're meeting? And then I'm going to ask you how they find you, because so a person, well, first of all, how do they contact you normally?
Most people come to me through word of mouth. It's still a very new industry. People are just figuring out what it is. So normally it's that a friend says to you, you know, I have a coach and she really helped me with this. You should call her. That's how people find me. But now we're coming into a new era where corporations and companies are beginning to see the value of supporting their employees at this level. Because if you help them with their personal development, then they're more available to do good work. And if you help them with their professional development, they're more available to do good work. So now some of the best companies to work for in Omaha have been contacting me, and I go on site to their companies and coach their employees every month.
They contact you, and we talked a little bit earlier before the taping in terms of how many folks are out there like you. You know, we're broadcast statewide. In the Omaha area, what are we talking, and what would you guess in terms of as we get further out?
Omaha's very lucky. We have an exceptional set of coaches here. In fact, I moved from Denver to Omaha just to be with the coaches that are here. I would say there are at least 50 to 100 coaches in the Council Bluffs, Omaha Metro, and statewide. There's probably another 20 that I don't even know about.
Are they doing this part-time? Are they doing it full-time? What's the...
Most people are still doing it part-time, but I started part-time and now it is my full-time living, so.
Wow, you've just got all sorts of things
Yeah.
going on. All right, I want to go back to the people with whom you're meeting. So they contact you usually because someone has suggested that they do that. Walk us through the process. They call you. I would imagine not everybody who calls winds up being. Do you call them clients, Flame?
We do.
Okay, so becomes a client, but at least their interest is there. So tell us, they contact you, and then what happens?
So on my end, in that first conversation, I'm assessing whether they're really a candidate for coaching, because we pointed earlier to things like therapy or advice or legal counsel even. Sometimes people know they need something, but they're not sure what. And so I'm assessing whether they're really a candidate for coaching, or is it something slightly different.
How do you do that?
Well,
How do you do that?
You're listening. Coaching is going to show up in a couple of ways. You're going to see that the person really wants to move forward and isn't quite sure how. If they give a bunch of psychological stories and they're more in their pain and suffering, it may be that therapy is appropriate at this stage in their development, and then coaching could come in later after they've done some healing work. So it's nuanced, but we're just listening to what's actually going on for the person and what do they hope to get out of our time together.
Well, you really have to be kind of all things. You're kind of a jack of all trades to be able to meet someone. Where do you meet them? Do you meet them in an office? Do you meet them where they'd like to meet? How does that work?
I have a home office. A lot of times I also go into people's homes. Luckily, it's a profession we can do on the phone or Skype. So I'm working with people all over the world from the comfy desk in my office.
Okay, so this is a big time trust profession. So if
Yes.
you're not meeting with them, across the table, and you are using technology, is there a different approach that you take, or does it still feel the same as long as you're following that
It still feels the
process?
same. We're still using the same deep listening skills, and that comes across even if I can just hear your voice.
Can a person learn to listen? I mean, can someone who's interested in this field, because I would imagine that is at the heart of it, not only just to listen, but to be able then to follow up objectively.
Right. Well, it takes one to know one. You're a very good listener, Kathy. Yes, you can learn to listen, and that's where the personal development of the coach really matters, because you have to learn to get out of your own way as a coach in order to really see the person that's in front of you
Okay.
and hear what they're saying.
When they come into you, is there a common challenge? I know no two people are alike, but is there a common roadblock for these people if they're at a crossroads and they're saying, oh my gosh, which way do I go? And if there is, what is that?
People are frustrated. Something isn't working. They're experiencing either frustration, resignation, or they may even be at the level of cynicism. This is never going to work. And that's what coaches are here for.
Okay, say those three words again. Frustration.
Frustration, resignation, and cynicism.
Okay, how many folks with whom you meet are you sending on to another professional before you think it's time? And are you collaborating with the other professional to say, hey, I'm going to send, Joe your way, and then the two of you are talking?
Probably a third of the time I'm collaborating with another professional to get this person the support they need.
Okay,
And maybe 1 out of every 20 am I saying, coaching is really just not for you right now. Go and do that independently and come back to me after you've completed that course of cleanup.
I would imagine that's kind of hard for someone who's mustered up the courage to give you a call to begin with. That's probably not the answer they want to hear, right?
Sometimes, and sometimes it's a great relief to have someone say to them, if you were to see a tax advisor, this would give you some clarity, and then you might be able to really be available to be coached.
Okay. All right. So obviously want to respect the clients with whom you're working, but just take us, if you could. You've done it 12 years, so I would imagine you've kind of closed a few doors. Maybe not all the way. Maybe they're never always, all the way closed. But kind of walk us through, if you can think of an individual who came to you and give us a little bit about where they came from and then their journey moving forward and maybe even where they are today.
Sure. So I have a client who came to me as a single mother of 4 children, had just been through a traumatic divorce, and she really didn't know what to do next. So a mutual friend of ours said, you should call Flame. She is a good coach and she could support you through this. So this client and I talked. We've known each other now for a couple of years. And she began to see that, number one, she wasn't even clear about the terms of her divorce agreement. So that was causing her a lot of stress. She had a lot of negative self-talk, which is very common. Human beings do that. So she had talked herself out of some really good ideas, like going back to school. And ultimately, she went back to school, became a chef in her culinary arts program at her local community college, and also in the same time frame really leaned into being a great mother, which is what she always wanted, but had backed off because her marriage was in the way. There were all these things in the way, and now she's a phenomenally successful mother of 4 who's taking care of her family in a way that she just never could before.
Where does this come from with you to be able to help people and provide an insight that I would imagine often you feel goes beyond your years, right?
Yeah.
From where are you drawing to get this kind of, I know a lot's listening, but and it's got to be such a feel good, but where do you get that in order to be able to transfer that? It's got to be more than the certification class, it's got to be a lot more than, so talk about what's at the heart of you in order for you to do this so well for others.
Frankly, it comes from my spiritual practice, and I guess I've always been someone who wanted more out of life and didn't really know how to achieve that. I wanted excellence, I wanted to be known for doing good work, and really that's the foundation of coaching, is to help people continuously and sustainably produce extraordinary results. So I've always naturally been in alignment with that, and then having a spiritual practice that really teaches me how to do that has made me the kind of coach that I am today.
So what percentage of folks go through this whole process and decide that they want to do it themselves? They want to become the life coach for somebody. Because so often when we're helped, when somebody offers us something, we want to be able to give back. Of
course.
And I would imagine you're going to have those personalities out there who say, how do I get involved with this, right? What happens in your
So far, not very many have actually gone on to become coaches. 5 or 6 have started the process, and it's intense, and sometimes they don't continue. But I would say that most people leave with a very big bag of coaching tools that they're using in their everyday life. The way that I ask questions, the kinds of things that I'm looking at in conversation, that never leaves them. So whether it's in their parenting, at work, in their marriage, with their aging parents, they are using those coaching skills to be more successful.
Okay, I want to change gears a little bit because we've talked the personal side of things, and I think we have a visual in terms of how that looks, whether it's just one-on-one or you're Skyping, whatever the case may be. But I want to cross over now to the business industry.
Okay.
And talk a little bit about your experiences there. Do they start as a one-on-one with maybe a manager calling you and saying, hey, I'm thinking I want to make a change here? And how does that process work? Are you working with that person individually before you branch out into maybe the teams, and then it kind of gets bigger and bigger, it's the ripple effect, or tell us about the business side?
There are lots of ways that it can work, and I've done it a lot of ways. The most successful way that I've seen is when I'm brought in as a coach almost as part of the benefits package, and I'm given license to coach everyone about whatever comes up for them, personal or professional, because whatever it is, it's probably standing in the way of them being their most productive selves. And I get to keep it all confidential. I don't have to report any of it out to the organization. I'm just there to support the individual that's in front of me. And of course I end up seeing some themes and reporting those out to the people who need to hear the themes that are going on in their company. But for the most part, it is just a one-on-one process where I am supporting this one person with what it is that they need support around.
Do you do the team approach too, though?
Sure.
So dynamics come into play.
Yes. In one of the organizations that I'm in right now, all of the account managers were having the same upset. So ultimately, okay, let's talk as a team of account managers. Let's have a group coaching session. And then they get to learn from one another, which is really valuable.
And how often are you going in to meet with those groups in terms of, the sessions? Is it a one-time deal? Do you kind of get a sense yourself and advise them then in terms of how often you return?
I definitely co-create that with the managers who are in charge. Some of them want me to come in as often as I can. Some of them don't want me there more than once a quarter. It's very individual. It's very much based on what's happening, the intensity of what's happening. Some organizations are going through immense change and they want a lot of support, a lot of time with me. And some are making slow transitions and they can take it more easily. And we're just there once a month, touching base and giving people a little love.
So if we have some business owners out there who are watching, and I'm sure we do, and they're saying, I wish she would just ask her this question, and it would at least be the beginning of maybe solving not the world's problems, but at least those within the company. What would I be asking you for those business owners, do you think? What's on top of mind for them, because they know we've got a life coach on today?
I think the business owners want to know what's the value in it for me. If I don't get to know what's going on behind closed doors, why would I want to spend money on a coach? Well, the truth is that every employee that leaves your organization costs you money. And employees quit because they're unhappy. So if we can help them find happiness, satisfaction, fulfillment, they're more likely to stay. And that in and of itself is an incredible return on investment. And it's also points us to producing and creating high-functioning teams. Most business environments have at least 20% of their staff that's actively disengaged, meaning they are fighting what it is you're trying to accomplish. And as a coach, I can help them either move on, coach themselves out of the position that they really don't love, or get them engaged again.
Yeah, we tend to get buried, though, in the day-to-day, Flame. And I think there are folks out there, whether we're talking on the personal side or the professional side, or both, saying, boy, that sounds great in theory, but I really don't have the time because there's so many other front burner items going on right now that tends to get back burnered. We can tend to be reactive instead of proactive. And so for those folks out there thinking this would be a good idea, what pushes them just a little bit further over, whether it's personal or professional?
The question I always ask people is, what would it be like for you to be different for the rest of your life? To never have to have this conversation about money, time, overwhelm, stress, ever again. Would it be worth an hour? Would it be worth 8 hours over the next 3 months? If it would, you might want to start now.
Interesting. All right, here's a question for you. How do you know, I would imagine you get pretty you're probably not supposed to get emotionally involved, but I would imagine that you do, and you probably don't ever want any case closed, but how do you, the life coach, know when a case is closed? When the client has done what he or she, other than the obvious, when can you let go, right?
It happens. There are clients who say, okay, we're done here. And a lot of it is that the coaching agreement is set with the client in the beginning. We're looking at what do you hope to achieve out of this. So once we've achieved what they came to get, the case is closed until they see something else they want to get.
Do you follow up with enough of them to really know, in other words, and I'm not going to liken what you do to the reality shows, but you see these transformations on the reality shows. People become different people, and almost you can kind of see it's genuine sometimes, right? But then the cameras go away and people go back to their regular lives without that. Do you find, or what do you find in terms of following up with folks down the road? Are they managing things and sustaining things in such a way, or are you finding there might be a little bit of maintenance program necessary there?
I think it's a both and. Again, the coaching tools that they found through doing the original course of coaching, some of them stayed with them. They're little nuggets of wisdom, little ways of doing things that they've learned. And at the same time, there's always a deeper level because human beings are so complex and there's new situations coming up all the time. And that's where the maintenance program really, I have many, many clients who call me and say, let's do 6 sessions. I haven't talked to you in a year, let's do 6. Or let's talk every month until I'm just done. And then they're never done. So the people who are really engaged in their lives and see that the coaching can support them with just about anything, they never leave.
Okay. Is this a program that can be covered by insurance?
Not at this time.
Okay, so it's private pay.
Yes.
And one of the other things that we haven't really talked about here are age groups. We've talked about personal and professional, but we haven't talked about when is the right time, right? Is somebody too young to come see you? Is somebody too old to come see you? Or is it just something innate in us and we know? Talk about the ages that you're serving.
Yeah, it's ageless. I have served people who are in their early 20s and people who are past retirement. So it's definitely a whole gamut. And the innate part is that they just want to see a change. They want their lives to be more satisfying. They want something more fulfilling out of what it is they're doing every day.
Okay, so we have about a minute remaining, right? So you have people who are watching. They're thinking this might be for them. Is there one phone number they call? Is there, what's their first plan of, do they have to do some soul searching first? What's the first step they take in going this direction?
Yeah, really ask yourself whether you'd be willing to have the support of someone in your life who was totally on your team and wanted you to succeed at your game. If the answer to that is yes, then you can Google life coaches, of course, but then you might get some uncertified, untrained people. So a better course of action would be to go to coachfederation.org and look at their credentialed coaches and choose one and do some interviews.
See what might be the best fit for you. We have a few websites that I want to put up for our viewers just in case they would like to delve a little bit more into this subject matter. So we have coachfederation.org, coachcertifications.com, and icfnebraska.com. Probably for our viewers, start with that bottom one, Flame. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, those are going to be local coaches who are trained and reliable.
Okay. I want to thank you very much for being here today. Hopefully we've inspired a few folks maybe to pick up the phone. It's never too late to make a change, right?
That's right.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Life coach, appreciate you being here to share your time, expertise, and your stories. Best wishes to you moving forward.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.